Listen Up with Jim Potts. Listen up, business owners, CFOs, human resource managers, and all managers and supervisors. Jim Potts is answering and addressing your questions and concerns, helping you stay out of court. Furthermore, please be advised that Jim's answers are not legal advice and are only intended as a guide based on his years of experience. The phone lines are open. 1-855-4-J-POTS. That's 1-855-457-6887. You can also email us at listenup@jameswilliampottsllc.com. Ready to listen up? Here is Jim Potts.
Hey, Jim Potts back on the air. Well, you've heard me say in the past that I'm always talking about that if you're too shy to want to call in, you can always send an email. Well, we got an email, and the person is mentioning about a past show that I did regarding this issue with transgender employees or transgender people using the same restrooms, etc. So this is a continuing issue that keeps coming up. And not to beat this into the ground, but there are some updates on this now that you need to be aware of. If you really think about it, it seems like the media is more and more reporting on and I don't know if you've been catching this on the news, but now they have these quote unquote bathroom bills that are being introduced into the legislatures for various states. So as an example, Illinois, South Dakota, Washington, and Missouri are now looking to aim to restrict the access of transgender people to bathrooms and locker rooms. So normally it's the other way when people are arguing about having a unisex restroom for people who are what they call transgender or leading the alternative lifestyle, whichever you prefer. And this person is writing in because this person is very upset, and I'm trying to diplomatically put this in here, but it says, why can those people, and, meaning the transgender people, use our restrooms? Because this particular person does not want to be in the restroom with a transgender person. Well, that comes up, or a person going through transition. Well, look, again, it brings up the issue about the bathroom. Should it be a men's room, a women's room, and a unisex room? I know that there's this one organization that's contacted me where the owner, he has a store, and he's very upset at the fact that he now has to have 3 restrooms all labeled, men's room, one for the ladies' room, and then one now that's a unisex restroom. So he's upset about that. Look, these are in fact very, very sensitive issues. As I stated, some of these states are trying to come up to deny access to transgender people. And I don't want to get into personal opinions and things of that nature for me, but my perspective is, look, everybody's rights have to be protected, period. It's very difficult and I know it's an inconvenience. I get all of that. But the times are changing. Just like the times changed when, it was an all Caucasian work environment, and here comes a black guy that wants to come there and go to work. And that created upheaval. There's always been. It goes back in time. Look at when the Chinese were here in the early 1900s. Look at the Irish when they came over here because of the Irish potato famine. Then the Italians, when they were coming over here, migrating here. Every time somebody new is introduced into, the population, there's always going to be people upset. Now, I'm not going to get into, from a religious standpoint and a moral standpoint about people leading the alternative lifestyle. I could care less. There's laws in place that protect these individuals. And these bills, these bathroom bills, restricting people from using the restrooms that are out there in Illinois, South Dakota, Washington, and Missouri. I'm not sure that I agree with that, but that's certainly the right of their legislators to pass whatever bills they want. This person that wrote in is upset because of the fact that it's actually a lady. She doesn't feel that she has to use the restroom, and a transgender person has the same opportunity. Now, look, as what I've been doing and preaching now over the last year is that I believe employers should be thinking about these unisex restrooms, make all the unisex restrooms for everybody. Now, the clamor that I get and the feedback I get sometimes is that the women don't like that because they don't want to use a restroom that men use. Now, from their perspective, I guess men don't always do the things that they're supposed to do, and some of them don't know how to quote unquote hit the target. But the realities is that that's one issue versus being sued. So if you want to keep all of the restrooms separate, that's fine. But now you're going to have to include a unisex restroom. So just like I told you, the store owner that didn't want to do that because now he's got three. Well, his problem is that he's also dealing with the general public. So if he wants to have a men's room and a ladies' room, okay, then that's fine. Don't do the unisex restroom. But what's going to happen when a transgender person or a person in transition wants to use the ladies' room because of the fact that they're self-identifying, as a woman? And now you've got a female patron that gets upset and doesn't want to frequent your business anymore. So that's the message that I would send to that person. Now, a lot of these bills let me make it clear, focus on public facilities. Public facilities, not necessarily in the, at the place of business. So I want to make that clear. No states has to do with public restrooms. But again, I think that that's problematic because, people need to use the restroom. They need to use the restroom. Now, I just want to tell you that in some states, such as California, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing has guidelines that provide that all employees, so I'm switching only to employees now, have a right to a safe and appropriate restroom facility. If you remember, I've spoken about this on one of my prior shows, and they're associating with the fact that if they can't properly use the restroom of their choice under these circumstances, that it could create a potential health hazard for them. Now, I'm not getting into that, into that area about the health issue, but the guidelines by the DFEH go on to instruct employers that transgender employees have the right to use a restroom or locker room that corresponds to the employee's gender identity, regardless of the employee's assigned sex at birth. The guideline underscores that there is not a particular medical or legal event required for an employee to be transgender, and that transgender employees should not be required to show proof of medical or legal status changes in order to be accommodated appropriately, which simply means that if somebody in transition says they want to use the ladies' room, they don't have to present you with some kind of legal proof or medical evidence. Don't even get into any of that. Again, and to me, with the employers, they need to start thinking about these transgender restrooms for everybody. The law is not ultimately going to care about your personal belief. This is no different than if you don't want anybody black working in the department, or when do we get to the point where I don't want a black guy using the same restroom as me? Does that sound familiar? What about when they had it where the individual in some of the southern states where we had water fountains marked for whites only and another one for coloreds only? You got to understand that with these things, it's going to be emotional for people. I get it. But the times, once again, are changing. Now they don't have water fountains that are labeled like that. And here we go with the restrooms. All right, it has nothing to do with color because this issue of transgender is crossing all color barriers. So you got to understand that with the wave that's coming, there's got to be some reasonable alternatives. And in my opinion, the reasonable alternative is to simply have the restrooms as unisex restrooms. Now look, aside from people in transition, there are times when an individual may be having another health issue or concern, so as what they do, they may need to use a private restroom for whatever the reason. Nobody ever objects to that. The objection is when somebody comes and they're a transgender person, that now all of a sudden you don't want to use the same restroom. You got to get away from that. You've got to get away from that. Now look, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing notes that employers should also consider offering these single occupancies, as I just stated. They have guidelines that further provide that if an employer provides a single occupancy bathroom, it must make clear that use of this restroom is voluntary. So it can be voluntary. Nobody has to assign it, is what they're saying. So here's what they're saying. They're saying you can't assign that unisex restroom, to the transgender person. They're saying that you can have it, but if Jim is in transition, you can't say that's the only one that you can use. That's why I'm telling you is what you need to consider is to have all of them unisex, and now you don't have that as an issue. Because this will be enforced. Now look, even though sexual orientation is not a protection on a federal level, you've heard me mention that before, the EEOC has been pushing regarding this issue in terms of restrooms. And they did have a case similar to this where they found for the employee because of the fact that the employer tried to assign a particular restroom to the individual. The times are changing. I keep saying that. I'm going to keep stressing that because you need to consider what I'm telling you about these unisex restrooms. Now, there's no federal legislation on this, and there's no federal court cases that I'm aware of that actually supports this business about the unisex restroom and whether or not somebody can be assigned. But if the EEOC keeps pushing hard enough, Washington, D.C., the powers to be in Washington, D.C. are going to finally listen, and they're going to start establishing these guidelines. You might as well get in front of all of this. You don't want the litigation where you end up being the test case that goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. You need to consider this issue. And, I hate to tell you leave the emotion out of it, but the realities are you need to leave the emotion out of it because you're trying to hold back a tidal wave with a teaspoon at this point, and the realities are it's going to change. So to me, get ahead of the curve so you don't have any issue. This business about employees liking this, not liking this, and create morale issues. I don't want to use the same restroom. Look, we already know that the employees love doing anything but working. So having an issue that they can turn around and chat about all day, they're going to do it. So take the advice for what it is. I think you should start looking toward having unisex restrooms. And you can see that I've discussed this issue about restrooms before, but it's going to be coming again. And to this particular person that sent this email in, I'm sorry you feel that way, but if you really think about it and go back in our time in the work environment, when people were restricted from the work environment, and you know what, not just even blacks and whites. What about men with women? There was an issue about women in the work environment, working in some different fields. So this is always going to be an issue when somebody new gets introduced, that has a different lifestyle or they're a different type of individual because they're from a different place, and all of a sudden now this is what we like and don't like. The courts don't care about what you like and don't like. They care about protecting individuals that fall in these protected classes. And that's what you're going to have to take into consideration. All right, with that last comment, it's time to close out this segment. But let me remind you that you can also hear us on Facebook at Listen Up. And you can subscribe to us on iTunes. Just search for Jim Potts or Listen Up with Jim Potts. And as a reminder, we take calls every third Friday. But if you're the shy type like this individual and just wanted to send an email, please be free to do so. You can reach us at 855-4J-POTS or 855-457-6887. Or you can email me, like I said, at listenup@jameswilliampottsllc.com. Okay, I'm Jim Potts. I will continue to fight the fight. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for being a part of Listen Up with Jim Potts. We take your calls every third Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for your questions and concerns. Call us at 1-855-4J-POTS. That's 1-855-4J-POTS. Again, that's every third Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time at 1-855-4J-POTS. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on iTunes, and link up with us on LinkedIn. You can also email us at listenup@jameswilliampottsllc.com. Until next time, make it a great week.